Hi, my name is Monika. This channel is called Afropean Monika, partially because I like to discuss mixed race matters here. Today's topic is related to being mixed race, but maybe before I get there, I'll just introduce my guest, Mulatto Vanguard.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mulatto Vanguard. My channel is the same, Mulatto Vanguard. Basically, on the channel, what I do is I promote a space for Black, white, biracial people of the European and African mixed race ancestry. And my main focus is basically discovering the mulatto history around the world. So I'm American based. So a lot of my findings, if I talk about, article analysis or history, a lot of it's in America, but I am exploring a lot in Europe as well, and soon to be in South America and even in Africa. I've kind of dipped my toes over in that region as well because I've been to the Gold Coast or Ghana. So yeah, I take it as an international perspective, basically a researcher of mulatto history. But like I said, I'll reiterate, ultimately I want to create a space for those of us who are mixed race, Black and white, to share our collective experiences.
That's a really cool introduction. I should add a little bit more about myself. So I will just say that I'm based in London. Just like Mulatto Vanguard, I've been to Ghana, and that's something that connects us. We will be talking about Plaçage. Plaçage was a recognized extralegal system in French and Spanish slave colonies of North America, including the Caribbean, by which ethnic European men entered civil unions with women of African, Native American, and mixed race descent. Obviously, this system gave birth to a lot of mixed race people. We'll talk about that. We will talk about the wealth transfer that happened as a result of that system.
I feel like this is kind of an academic, or excuse me, a university level discussion, because we don't really hear about these, the plaçage, concept in like elementary school or families. It's kind of hidden within the history. So that's one thing, is we're digging up the mixed race history as it pertains to us. And like you said, with the wealth transfer and entrepreneurship that was developed with these mixed race communities and courtship. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this thing is called, the system is called plaquage or plaçage, because I heard different people call it differently. So I think it might be good to just say that what it comes from French, I believe,
Yeah.
and it means to be placed with.
Yeah.
So let's just say that, just in case either one of us is mispronouncing. So how are we going to do it, Mulatto? Would you like to tell our audience how we are going to explore the topic?
You actually wrote an article, or you contributed to an article, I believe, right?
I wrote it. I did write it.
What sources, I'm curious to know, I should have asked you behind the scenes, like what sources did you gather to construct this article?
Oh, wow. To be honest, I have it here. It was 2011, 2012. I'm not sure if you can see it.
Yeah, I
so
can see
I
the
cannot
date.
tell you. I can't remember. I really can't remember. But it was written for a magazine that
Is it London, UK-based
yeah, it's a
magazine?
London-based magazine that explored, Black heritage, brown heritage, and stuff like that. Just like yourself, I mean, I am not a scholar. I have a master's degree, but that's not the purpose of this conversation. We are not trying to be, above anyone here. What we'll do here is we're just going to explore the topic of plaçage or plaquage. We will read the article essentially. So this is the article. It is called Your Place or Mine. It was written by me over a decade ago. It's history, so we can always go back to it. So let's just begin. Would you like to say anything else before we start reading?
No, I think we could just dive right into it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So do you mind being the first one to read?
Sure, no problem. What I'll point out first is interesting. The picture here, the illustration on the article, it's a plantation, yucca plantation. I think they call it Melrose Plantation today. It's based out in Louisiana area. I believe it's, yeah, the Louisiana area, which is interesting because that's where When we dive into the article and some of the history of the Plaçage, that's where there was the largest mixed race or mulatto presence in the United States of America. So there's a lot of history.
Interesting.
Yeah, because of the French and kind of enslaved Africans commingling, there's a lot of history, a rich history of mulatto.
During the reign of King Louis XIV, when France and Spain sent their men overseas to plantations far from the cities, the women of their homeland were often unwilling to sacrifice their creature comforts and follow them into unknown territories, such as those in Louisiana. While the authorities of both countries needed the colonial population to grow, they were equally desperate to keep their men happy. So they turned a blind eye to their countrymen fraternizing with the local female population. Subsequently, it became normal practice for white French and Spanish men to pick the dark women of African, Asian, or Creole descent for their lovers. These women became known as placees. A placee describes a female of color who, during those times, was placed with a white, French, or Spanish or Creole male, in effect, a common law marriage.
The system flourished throughout the French and Spanish colonial periods, apparently reaching its peak between 1769 and 1803, and drawing most of its fame and notoriety from its open application in New Orleans. By 1788, 1,500 Creole placees were being maintained by white men. Placees were there to fulfill sexual duties and to produce children. It was not uncommon that girls as young as 12 were taken as mistresses with or without their consent. Some of them were trained by their mothers for the purpose, while some were just chosen for their beautiful ebony bodies and immature minds. Religious and social activists, instead of confronting the practice itself, expressed their anger and opposition towards it by discriminating against placees and treating them as common prostitutes. When the services of their colored wives were no longer necessary, the men would often dispose of their placees and simply marry women of their kind. Marriage between the races was forbidden according to the Code Noir, Black laws, which forbade Black people from marrying and which has been described as one of the most extensive official documents on race, slavery, and freedom ever drawn up in Europe. However, some of the husbands grew fond of their placees and would not put them or the mulatto children they produced together aside, even after they legally took respectable in quotes, white women as their wives. This resulted in them minding two families at the same time, one for the eye and the other, it would appear, for the soul. Some of the men even went to an extent of naming their placees and the children from this liaison as primary heirs over their white family members. Some white fathers chose to quietly and carefully place their mulatto daughters. One of those relationships was highly successful. Okay, I am going to mispronounce the name, but I'll try. Eulalie de Mandeville and Eugene de McCarthy, who, being fulfilled in their relationship, never married outside of it.
Cool. Their union resulted in 5 children and lasted almost 50 years. Eulalie de Mandeville de McCarthy, who died in 1848, became a relatively successful merchant. Upon the death of a patron and lover, Plaçage, is that the correct pronunciation?
Placees.
Could at times justifiably and legally challenge and successfully win a claim for up to a third of their husband's property. But often placees, after being disposed of or after losing their patrons without inheritance, or who did not challenge the system for it, had to quickly set aside their pain and focus on fending for themselves and their children.
One of those women was Marie-Therese d'Ailly.
Despite being the daughter of African slaves, Mary, born at the Louisiana French outpost of Natchitoches, had a good start as a child born into the stable family environment. She was trained in pharmacology and nursing from a child and gained valuable skills which assisted her in gaining financial independence in later life. Tragically, in 1758, both of Mary's parents died as a result of an epidemic outburst, and her life took a different path. Mary became the placée of Claude Thomas Pierre Metoyer, a French colonial merchant turned planter. Already a mother of 5 children from a previous relationship, which started when she was very young. Over the years, Mary bore another 10 children to Metoyer. In 1778, he freed her after the parish priest filed charges against Coin as a public concubine and threatened to have her sold at New Orleans if they did not end their relationship. As a freed woman, Mary remained with Metoyer for another 10 years. There was no happy ending for the relationship, though. Having become more wealthy and influential over the years and moving into a certain society, Metoyer decided to exchange Mary Teresa for a white woman, ironically also called Mary Teresa. To cushion the blow, Metoyer gave the mother of his children some unpatented land, identifying the shortage of tobacco, a valuable commodity in the struggling colony. Mary planted tobacco on the land. With her children, she also trapped bears and wild turkeys and sold the meat at the New Orleans market, alongside hide and oil. Drawing on her knowledge of pharmacy, Mary also manufactured medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mary lived a frugal life in service to others and invested her income in purchasing the freedom for her pre-Metoyer children, her grandchildren, and other youths in the neighborhood. She also invested in 3 African-born slaves to provide the physical labor that was becoming more difficult as she aged. After securing a rare colonial patent on her homestead in 1794, Marie petitioned for and was given a land concession from the Spanish crown. There, she set up a ranch, 667 acres, and engaged a Spaniard to tend her cattle. Shortly before her death in 1816, Concoin sold her homestead and divided her remaining properties, including the African slaves and their offspring, among her own progeny. That's interesting. You know, that was the practice in those days, that the slaves, the ex-slaves had slaves. It's a tricky one, right? But that was the practice in those days. Marie-Thérese's daughter, Marie-Suzanne, also went on to become a shrewd businesswoman. I'm assuming that this one was her mulatto daughter.
Okay.
I've not checked that, but I think that's the case. As often happened among the Place's children, Marie-Suzanne had also become a placée. Her first union with a young physician resulted in a son. After the relationship ended, she became a placée of yet another, this time for life. Marie-Suzanne also became a second-generation entrepreneur, even more successful than her mother. She left behind an estate worth over $61,000, an equivalent of $1,500,000 in today's currency. Would you like to take it from here?
Sure. Though no photos of her could be found, the name Mary Teresa Dite Coin undeniably brings to memory one of the greatest female entrepreneurship of that era. Similar influence had also been extended throughout the lives of a few of her children, who are positively mentioned on the history pages of a variety of contributions, especially aimed at the Black society. Nicholas Augustin Metoyer, eldest of Mary's children, with Metoyer, founded St. Augustine Parish Church, believed to be America's first church founded by and for free people of color. As the 1970s historical and archaeological investigations confirm conclusively, in 1796, Nicholas's brother, Louis Metoyer, an educated and successful property owner, was granted the Canes River land, which over the years was believed to have been owned by Mary Teresa. If I'm pronouncing that right. It's the French name. Tricky. On this land, Luis's family built Melrose Plantation, which I believe that's the picture I can show.
Mm-hmm.
That's it right there, if I'm not mistaken. On this land, Luis's family built Melrose Plantation, also known as Yucca Plantation. The site
Mm-hmm.
contains what may be the oldest buildings of African design built by and for Blacks in the country. Melrose Plantation and its buildings have been recognized and documented by history. Those buildings include the main house, the Yucca House, the Ghana House, the African House, and some outbuildings. The last house, with all of its unique features, is believed to be one of the eldest buildings of African origin. The plantation, which currently has daily guide tours, was declared a National Historical Landmark in 1974, and in 2008 was included among the first 26 sites on the Louisiana African American Heritage Trail. The fact that Mary Teresa's life was fraught with persecution, rejection, and enslavement makes her story even more compelling. The dark moments of her life failed to kill her spirit. Instead, they helped to strengthen it, resulting in a birth of another and better story. I think that's it.
Let's stop sharing the screen.
So that was the plaçage kind of concept, was a way for white men to go around the system and have courtship relationships with women of color, essentially, right? And they weren't, a lot of times these relationships weren't there. Most of the time they weren't granted by the state, because you had to get a marriage license. And this is a highly religious country. Maybe not so much today, because I'm speaking New Orleans, which is French settlement, so Catholicism. So the church was involved in the relationship and marriage institution.
Of course, then Black people couldn't marry. It was illegal to, be in interracial relationships. The patrons would have just rejected the placees after they were done with them. However, there were also times, as we just read, that they loved them, so they didn't do that, and they allowed them to inherit, or their children. They were able to override the system, because technically mixed race children were not allowed to inherit from their white fathers. The system was not exactly legal. It was an extralegal system. However, some of the fathers did want to include their children, as we've just read, and, based on the historical account of Plaçage. So obviously there was wealth transfer involved in this whole system, wealth transfer from the white community to the Black community. We've read that, of course, the women were maintained, the Black women or the places were maintained, but the children often inherited wealth. What I find really interesting, for instance, when it comes to Marie the Concoin, obviously she found herself in a difficult position, but she was able to make the most of it. That was the focus pretty much of this article. It was meant to show that her patron, when he became more wealthy, he decided to just leave her and marry another one, a white woman, who was also called Marie Therese, which is so sad, by the way. But, she did not just sit down, and she did not just cry. She started a business. She started selling tobacco. She would trap birds and wild turkeys. She would sell the meat. She made it work, and her children made it work. And as we've read, they were, recognized, and she was even able to help people, which is so amazing. This is just one article, this is just one story, but I think that's my takeaway. It inspires me to know that, yes, you know what, you can be in a difficult position, but what will you do? Like, how will you come out? There is a way out. That's my takeaway from the article. What is yours?
Yeah, most definitely. From the article, it really opens up my eyes to the history of this concept, because I wasn't really aware of it. And it ties into the laws, the historical context. But like you said, what I saw with it too is, like, a lot of the women, the placees who are in those relationships, they've developed the assets, they develop assets, yeah. They've acquired property. There was a lot of laws to prevent them from acquiring property, but a lot of them did. And they were also able to run, legitimate, rooming houses, like a room on board, and small businesses as hairdressers, merchants, and then also as a seamstresses, right? So there were a lot of business and entrepreneurship that came within that field, that endeavor. So there's
I
a
think
lot of
that's inspiring. I think that's inspiring, isn't it? If they could do it in those days, like you said, there were so many laws preventing them from being able to get ahead. Do we have any right to complain these days, discussing who said what, who did what, and all that? Like, isn't it better to invest our energy into making things better for ourselves, for our families, for our communities?
Most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, I think the context is key where they're at. I don't know. I think with the social media, with today, people have the voice to express themselves. But I agree with you. It's not, it's not that good to dwell. It's not good at all to dwell on the negativity or who doesn't like you. But I think it's different from somebody kind of sharing their experiences and their story and crafting that story in a way to where the public, it's easily digestible for the public. Is because that can be seen as art. You're telling your story. I mean, that's my goal, is not only,
Absolutely.
verbally express myself, but also in text format. But yeah,
I
this is,
agree. I agree with that, because we have that. Of course, there are times to share the story, to share what was done to you, and to share how you've overcome, to share what you think the solution is for that not to happen again. Because of course, we don't want certain things to continue happening to us, right? But then there's also that other side of social media, right, where it's just toxic, right? And it's
yeah, I'd probably say
so
most of it.
most of it, especially when it comes to conversations about race,
Yeah, yeah,
often
yeah,
times.
it decays into negativity. Yeah, yeah, I would say most of it, most of the platforms, it's a lot of even YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. It's a lot of negativity, but there's a lot of, the tool is extremely useful because you can connect with people and you can acquire information that you might not have had access to if you didn't talk to, or converse with certain people. So, because I have contacts, Instagram, obviously YouTube, Facebook. So I'm able to share and receive information, very useful information that, of course, I'm going to restructure and then share it back with the public the way that I believe it should be shared. But you
Yeah,
obviously can
yeah.
tell I'm more of the academic, even though I have a
No.
bachelor's degree.
I appreciate. When I say this, I just mean like in general. I appreciate your channel, which is why we are sharing this conversation. I don't watch the channels that are toxic in my eyes. I would not invite someone who I think is toxic on my channel. I wouldn't do that. I'm just saying in general. I wouldn't even call out the names because I don't want to give it energy. I don't want to give it power. I'm saying that to myself as well. Let's focus on bringing value, on delivering value, and not gossip or like drama or all that. Let's just focus on delivering value, because that's where the solutions are, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But then another thing is
Entrepreneurship.
yes, exactly, that's another thing that we were to discuss. How important is that for people that come from minority backgrounds, mixed race people specifically, in our conversation? How important do you think that is?